Hello everyone. Hope you are all doing very well. So in my previous lecture, I described about the format of the chapter executive of NCERT, and now in this lecture, as I told you earlier, that we will discuss the points one by one. So the first point was the introduction of this entire chapter, and as I told you that introduction will have some key concepts which are mandatory to understand the entire chapter. And from that key concept, the first key concept was the three organs of the government. Now, what is three organs of the government? The three organs of the government, or the theory of three organs of the government, is based on the power of separation, or the separation of powers. What is the separation of powers? In simple terms, if we try to understand separation of power, separation of power. This theory was given by a political thinker called Baron de la Montesquieu. This theory basically states that during the medieval ages, the power of making the laws, the power of enforcing the laws, and the power of interpretation of the laws, or to give the justice, all of these powers were concentrated into few hands or concentrated into one person. And this kind of government formation is we called monarchy, or we can say that it is a dictatorial form of the government. So to do not form a dictatorial form of government and to form a democratic government or the republic government, we have to divide this power in different institutions. This is the basic concept behind the separation of the power. The power to form the law, the power to enforce the law, and power to interpret the laws. These three powers must be divided in different organs so that there must be a better utilization and there must be a better democracy, and also there can be a method of checks and balance, and no institution can override each other. This is the basic concept behind the separation of power. And according to this concept of separation of power, Indian Constitution mentions three different organs which have one of them have the to legislate the power to legislate the laws, the another one has the power to implement the laws, and the third organ has the power to interpret the laws or evaluate the laws. So what are the three organs? So this is the concept behind the separation of power. Now if we look at the three organs of the government, we will discuss all the organs and the power related to them one by one. The first organ of the government is legislature. Legislature. What the term legislature simply means, the organ of the government which formulate the laws, which formulate the policies, or which formulate the rules for the entire country. The organ of the government which formulate or which make the laws for the country or rules for the country, or we can say that which makes the policy for the country. So the power of making laws, the power of making rules, and the power of making policy for the country is given to the legislature. And who is playing the role of legislature in our country? Then Indian Parliament is playing the role of legislature in our country. So I will mention here that Indian Parliament is playing the part of the legislature. So remember this point as well, that Indian Parliament is playing the role of the legislature in our country. It means the power to make laws, the power to formulate the laws, or the power to make policies, the power to make rules, or to change the constitution as well. These all powers are vested in the legislature, or the Indian Parliament will make the laws for the country. No other organs have the power to make the laws for the countries. Remember that this power is only given to the legislature part of the country. The first thing, I think it's clear. Now we come to the second part, or the second organ of the government. The second organ is the executive, about which we are going to study in detail in this particular lecture. The second part, or the second organ, is the executive. Now what is the basic function assigned to the executive, and which power we have given to the executive? They were given the power to formulate the laws. Now executive have given the power to enforce the laws, or to implement the laws, or to look after the day-to-day administration of the country. Now remember, the power given to the executive is to implement the laws. To implement the laws, or in other term, to enforce the laws. to enforce the laws. The executive branch of the government has given the power to implement the laws and to enforce the laws and to look after the day-to-day administration of the country. And remember, in India, the whole executive branch is accountable to the legislature. It means the whole executive branch is accountable to the parliament. What are the posts which are under the executive in India? The president, vice president, prime minister, councils of minister, the permanent executive or the permanent bureaucracy, all of them are under the executive, which enforce the laws and look after the day-to-day administration, and after implementing the laws, they are accountable to the parliament of the country. Understood? So the power to implement the laws and to enforce the laws is given to the executive part of the Indian government. So the second point, or the separation of power, is to enforce the laws. Now we come to the third organ of the government. The third organ is the judiciary. C point. Judiciary. Judiciary simply means the organ of the government which has the power to interpret the laws. Which has the power to interpret the laws. Or we can say that to evaluate the laws. To evaluate the laws. Judiciary has the power to interpret the laws or to evaluate the laws. For example, Indian judiciary, if you look at the Supreme Court or the High Court, they are given the power to interpret the laws or to evaluate the laws. Now, to understand these three powers, I will give you an example. For example, suppose that a legislature or the parliament make a law for the citizens of the India, and then after it get passed by both the houses, then it reach to the president for its own signature and approval. After the approval of the president, it will be enforced in the entire country. After the enforcement, suppose that there is a group of person or some people who feel that due to this law, my rights are being infringed. So they can approach to the judiciary to interpret the laws, that is this law is in accordance with the Indian constitution or not. Then judiciary will interpret that the particular law is valid or not. If judiciary found something unconstitutional in that particular law, then that law will be declared as null and void. So you can look by this example that basically the powers is divided in the horizontal manner, so that there must be a system of checks and balance, and no institution can override each other. So we can write here that this distribution is also called checks and balance distribution. Checks and balance distribution. And in such a checks and balance, no institution can override each other, and no institution can take all the powers in their own hand. So we have divided our powers or the functions of the government into three organs: the legislature, the executive, and the judiciary. The checks and balance, separation of power, and there can be no, and this is the horizontal distribution of power as well. This is also called the horizontal distribution of the power. It means all of the institutions are at the same level but have different powers, and no institution can override each other. This is also called the horizontal distribution of power. So this is the basic concept of behind our ruling structure or the ruling government of India. When we call the word government, it doesn't mean simply that parliament, or it doesn't simply means that ruling government. It means that legislature, executive, and the judiciary. The term government simply means it includes all of the three organs of the government. So it is the legislature, executive, and judiciary. The chapter 4 deals with the executive of NCERT class 11. The chapter 5 deals with the legislature, and the chapter 6 deals with the judiciary part of the Indian government. So this was the first point which is necessary to understand what are the roles which are assigned to them. So executive is assigned with the law implementation of the law. Now we will understand the executive in details in next chapters. Now first point in next class.